We're not actually going to have guests every single week. It was a tremendous amount of fun to have Alex from TOK last week and Kyle Aitu talking about Jamaica's massive contribution on the world stage in terms of creative industries. And we had a lot of fun, but I ended that one. We actually did a bonus round after. It was about 38 minutes. We had a bonus round after. And I was actually focused on talking about things that we should be proud of. It was Independence Week for Jamaica, and I pointed out a number of things that tend to make us proud, especially those of us who are Jamaicans who live abroad now, or the children of those who moved away years ago, decades ago. And some of the ones I talked about was, for example, one of the oldest golf courses in the Western Hemisphere is right here in Jamaica, the Manchester Golf Club out in Mandeville. I talked about the fact that somewhere like Black River had electricity very early. We talk about running water in Falmouth before New York City. We want to talk about things like one of the oldest post offices in the British colonies in the Western Hemisphere, according to the Jamaica Post website, is actually older than the US. It was founded before a post office was founded in the United States. So we have some really interesting things to be proud of, but at the same time, we tend not to talk about the things that we shouldn't be proud of, right? We have to eat humble pie. And I think that is important for us to acknowledge those things. You cannot improve if you don't actually measure things, if you don't accept constructive criticism, if you don't look at best practices around the world. And so today, just like in the first one, Vision 2030, stuff is written in here. And I want to talk about one of the specific national outcomes out of 15 that were put together when this was printed, and we would focus on crime, safety and security. And because the diaspora traditionally is focused on a few things, I want to welcome the people I have here on Instagram. I'm going to get some questions and I'll say hi to them. This way I can see questions from Instagram as well as questions from Facebook. But when we go through the national outcomes that were outlined, unfortunately, a lot of us, I think both resident Jamaicans and overseas Jamaicans, would agree that we haven't actually executed on a lot of those things. So while we are proud of our music, our culture, what we've done on the world stage in athletics, big up to the reggae girls, the reggae boys, what we've done in sprinting is amazing. But at the same time, we've dropped the ball on whether it's efficiency, right? We do have inefficiency issues in Jamaica, like any other developing country. But we not seem necessary to move as fast as correct in that. We have one of the, definitely in the top 10 murder rates, one of the highest murder rates in the world. We have a crime issue that we definitely need to be dealing with, and we're going through that right now. With states of emergencies, which is not a long-term solution. We have an education problem. Even though our K through 12 system, those of us who end up going to the US, Canada, the UK, tend to do really well, overachieve in most cases, because what we learn in 3rd, 4th, 5th form, some of that you just learned in freshman year at college in the US, but we're not so competitive on the K through 12 side. We essentially have an apartheid system within education, and we have to acknowledge that, the difference between traditional high schools and then the technical high schools, the non-traditional high schools. So, that is something that we need to be looking at. We have a healthcare system that has issues. There is continued improvement, and you have to always give credit that there is improvement, but it needs to happen faster. If you look at any country from a development standpoint, development comes for the countries that really invested in education, because they want an educated populace, right? Human capital is the single most important thing for any country to grow and create, increase per capita income and improve socio-economic status for people, right? Moving people from poverty into the middle class and more. So education is number one. We haven't been doing that. It's even been retrograde in some ways. Number two is infrastructure. That definitely has been a big focus for Jamaica. We look at Highway 2000, we look at the road works that are happening now. So infrastructure is finally happening. 30 decades too late. We haven't built a single new dam in the Kingston metropolitan area since before 1962, before independence, even though our population is like, 7 times? So that is an issue, infrastructure. You need a healthy population, right? if they can't go to work, it doesn't matter that jobs are available. People actually need to be healthy, and that's why the healthcare side matters, which also comes to food security, agriculture. We talk about climate change and climate resilience. We are an island. People fly here, come here on ships. So rising sea levels matter. If you can't go to the beach, people are really not going to come to Jamaica since we focus on sun, sea, and sand. So we need to differentiate. If Cuba really opens up to the US, that would be a major problem for us as well. So there are things we need to invest in, but the single biggest one really is crime. A lot of people leave Jamaica or refuse to come back because of the crime situation. And in the diaspora over the decades I've been involved, we usually are focused on education, crime, healthcare. Those are the three biggest issues they care about. Corruption is part of crime, so we kind of twin those together. But the World Bank has done a study in the past that said that if Jamaica could bring its crime levels just down to Costa Rica's levels, we would actually see GDP growth somewhere in the 3.5% per year. So we are going for this 5% in 5 years. We're making some progress, but just getting crime rates down to Costa Rica's levels could get us to 3.5%. Jamaica is not Costa Rica, right? It has two land borders, but at the same time there is some similarity in culture. We can learn best practices from these places. There are other countries that we can learn from. And so I want to actually dive into what was outlined. We actually don't need to come up with any new ideas. The ideas are written in this book, and they're just not being applied. So since most of us have never actually read this, I practically have studied it, but the goal, this was what I said, the goal is a Jamaican society is secure, cohesive, and just. And I have two things I want to focus on. Effective governance. Obviously we have to talk about that one, but that's important. And then security and safety. And the governance is an issue because if you have corrupt politicians or corrupt government actors, it's not going to help the crime situation. Right? Government contracts go into people who probably shouldn't have the government contracts or giving contracts in order to get votes to stay in power. That only feeds into crime. Right? It can't be do as I say, not as I do. The best leaders lead by example, and so when you look at somebody like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, as much as some people don't like that comparison, is there. So Charlotte is saying, what do you expect to do? Well, the first thing is that we need to diagnose the problems and treat problems, not treat symptoms. I think it's very clear. We're going to lay out literally in here. It has all the problems diagnosed in an entire chapter. It has our actions to take. But like Nadine Sutherland's song would say, action, not a bag of mouth. We actually need to take action, and we need the people who do vote to take action. The people who send money back to their family members in Jamaica need to prompt them to take action. It can't be that we just sit down and you just take whatever come. We can't continue to sit down in fear and then say, oh, we can't do anything. Hold the leaders accountable. Hold society accountable. Hold ourselves accountable. There has to be some personal responsibility that we take. What are we doing that might be contributing to discipline in society? Are we only depending on teachers who are under-resourced, schools that are understaffed to handle the discipline and raise our students, our kids? It starts at home. What are we as parents doing to inculcate better values and better attitudes? Right? Jamaica actually used to have a values and attitudes campaign. Maybe we need to bring that back. Because I think all of us can admit that there has been a slide in discipline. If you drive on the roads in Jamaica, and it is a frustrating experience. Unfortunately, it's the same in Miami. It's the same frustrating experience. The drivers are pretty much just as bad. India or China, we see that. So it can be dealt with. We don't want to pretend that it's unique to Jamaica. I remember a number of years ago, there's a program that they wanted to implement, and it's called Shot Spotter. This is a program that the police wanted to get. Flo had reached out to me to see if there was a way for the diaspora to help contribute somewhere in the region of $500,000 to $250,000, $750,000 US, $750,000 US to implement it in Jamaica. Shot Spotter has worked in Oakland. They actually deployed it in a few other places. New Jersey, they actually deployed it. and in Camden, I believe. And within 2 years, they were able to cut, murder rates, gunshot murder rates by 50%. So ShotSpotter is a technology invented in the United States that uses microphones and cameras to triangulate the sound of a gunshot where it's fired and actually pin it on a map, and the police can then see and can react. And the way it was explained to me was that most people don't die instantly from a gunshot. They're shot at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Nobody is able to get to them until 7, 8 a.m. in the morning when it's daylight, not at night. And so the people bleed out is actually the single biggest problem. ShotSpotter would help the police to quickly activate, get emergency services there, try and actually find the shooters, and then we can map the problem areas. I've actually seen a map from Mona Geoinformatics Institute up at UWI. They work very closely with the security forces. And they have a map. It can show you all the parts, Kingston, Spanish Town, Montego Bay, and showing you the hotspots where things are happening. And this is actually not just gun crimes or gunshots, but they have stuff related to whether it's a sexual assaults. I mean, that's all in there. Knife attacks. They actually have this data, and it is being used. They don't publicly talk about it, and they probably shouldn't, to be honest. We don't want to tell criminals what we do, but you don't want to just treat the symptom. Locking people up isn't good enough. America has proven that does not work. Building more prisons does not get people to stop doing what they're doing. It's the same way that, yes, we have an inefficient justice system, inefficient court system. Our case clear-up rate in Jamaica is atrocious, right? Especially the murder clear-up rate. I mean, if you think of it, 100 cases come in, less than 30 are really actually going to get to trial, and then out of those 30, 3 end up in a conviction. I mean, we just have fundamental issues with whether it's DNA or evidence collection. Forensics is an area that needs help, that requires capital more than anything else. There's funding. The last budget did increase funding for the Ministry of National Security, so we expect to see that go up. But I'm one of those people that believes a lot more needs to go into that, because that directly affects investment, both internal investment, external investment. More importantly, security is roughly 15 to 18% of the cost of doing business in Jamaica. If we could just have that frees up capital to go into research and development. It goes into hiring new staff. It goes into expanding to overseas markets. So you generate more cash that comes in. So having a safe environment is actually critical to economic growth. I mean, China couldn't do what it's doing. Singapore couldn't do what it's doing. Costa Rica couldn't do what it's doing. Chile. None of these these countries could execute their long-term development plan without having safety and security as a high priority alongside education. And those two are twin, because people are committing things because they lack resources, they lack access to good jobs, and so they decide that the better option for them is to go and steal. It's not that they all want to be rich and drive fancy cars, but in some cases, this is their only way to care for their families, and then they decide that I have some spoils I want to take care of. And then this other gang wants to now step on their turf, take their spoils, and if you're using the eater food mentality, which is really survival. If you're focused on survival and somebody tries to take your things from you that you're using to survive, you are going to lash out and fight. And so we need to really pay more attention to that. So I'm going to read some of these things. So it says, violent crimes have become one of the most pressing concerns for Jamaica. It has had a negative impact on all spheres of society and has been cited as a significant factor in the low levels of GDP recorded by Jamaica over the years. So we can agree with that. There's no question about that. We are poor at executing that one. So it's easy to diagnose, but they have solutions. So let's look at some of the issues and challenges. So one, we have a high murder rate. And that has not really come down. We still have a high murder rate. It is lower than in the past, but it's still high. And it's unacceptably high. That's ultimately what it is. We have guns, gangs, and transnational drug trade. Poses a real problem. We know how that goes down. Domestic violence is an issue that we don't talk about enough. In this Me Too era that is finally starting to be talked about. And they're building, battered women's homes is what we can call it that, but they're building homes for safety for women. And that is an issue. And of course, men do suffer domestic violence as well. Let's not pretend, but it's majority women that are being abused. We have dons and garrison communities. Let us not talk about how many garrisons one political party has. What we need to focus on is the fact that we have garrisons and we shouldn't. That can't work. They also talk about sexual violence, violence against children. Man, we've seen that it is actually the most heartbreaking thing, and everybody in the diaspora constantly talks to me about that one more than anything else. It hurts to read the newspaper when you hear about a 12-year-old, a 13, 14-year-old, especially these young girls being killed. What is happening? So there seems to be a problem there as well. We have a geographical distribution of violence. So I'm sitting here in Jamaica still. I'm not fearful based on where I am. And unfortunately, it is like anywhere else in the world. There are parts of New York that are less safe than parts of downtown Kingston. There are parts of Chicago that you will not get me to walk in, and nobody is going to really do that. So every country has pockets. And that's again, Jamaica is extremely concentrated. We know where not to go. We know what time not to go there. But we also are ostracizing those people and painting an entire community with a broad brush. So during the diaspora conference, actually I went on a walking tour, a foot tour of Trenchtown, guided by a Canadian who has moved to Jamaica, was married to a Jamaican, and he took us on the tour. And I brought along Akeelia Lawrence Maitland. Akeelia is a Northeast Diaspora Advisory Board representative. And we enjoyed it. We went to where Bob Marley grew up, the tenement yard. And I didn't feel any sort of apprehension. It wasn't unsafe, but there was also a time and place. So yes, geographical distribution of violence. And you can just look at where the state of emergencies have been in Jamaica to understand where that has been. We have a high percentage of youth involvement, so that's why it's important. We saw numbers today come out. Youth unemployment has actually come down from roughly 25% to I think 19.5 or so percent. So that is progress. And we need to keep bringing that rate down. If you look at Spain, you look at Greece, high youth unemployment, they're in the 30s, the 20s, like that is a recipe for disaster. That is where things end up boiling over when young people are impatient, they know how to use social media to pull together groups faster than normal, and they can spread information quickly. That hasn't really resulted in Jamaicans massing up like what we're seeing in Hong Kong, for example, right now. But we run the risk of doing that. Disaffected youth, especially young males, university 70% female here in Jamaica. Those young males, we need to reach out to them really quickly. We need intervention. And it says high percentage of males in criminality, so that's an issue. We have inadequate institutional capacity. I don't know if you've ever been to a police station in Jamaica. I've been to a few police stations in Jamaica. And I was amazed at some of the things that they were doing, and the way that, writing it on paper. Thankfully we now have apps where if you get pulled over right now, you need to worry, because